Hey, Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day. All Bills, all the time. And now Matt Beauvais and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
Well, it had to happen this way, right? If the Bills were going to go back to the AFC Championship, if the Bills were one win away from going to the Super Bowl, it had to be through Kansas City. We all knew that this was the prophecy, and now the Bills have a chance at rewriting their history of the last 5 years. We shall see how it plays out. Matt Beauvais, Sal Capaccio, another episode of It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Welcome to Chiefs Week, buddy. Here we go again.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. When I'm done with this, I'm going to look back and I'm going to do a little historical perspective of how many playoff games in the Bills' history they've played and how many now have been against the Chiefs. And we all know that these two teams have matched up specifically, whether it's regular season or postseason, a lot over the last, since Sean McDermott's, of course, taken over, and really about as much as a divisional opponent. They're very, very familiar, with each other. So that's going to be another week of a lot of talking. I don't expect it to get quite as toxic as it was last week with the Ravens. I always said this, Matt, and I've said this on the radio for many years, even before the Bills were good, even before Allen and Mahomes. I have to say it again. Since I was a little kid going to Bills games, I always felt the Kansas City Chiefs fans were some of the best fans in the National Football League as far as interacting with them. Midwestern hospitality, always so nice to you. And Matt, they feed us barbecue when we go there to KC.
Yeah, I always say it's the most similar NFL atmosphere and experience to Buffalo.
Yep.
If you have not been to a lot of other places, Kansas City and Buffalo are very similar in a lot of ways. And, we've been there a lot, so I think we got a good lay of the land these days. And that also means we have guests and friends in Kansas City. So Joining us, one of those people, Hayley Lewis from Kansas City Sports Network, Bleacher Report. Thank you for doing this again. We do this now every single time. So truly, you are a friend of the program.
I mean, it really is. We talk about this every single time we meet up yet again. We see each other more than we see our own division. So there's not only a friendship, but I mean, we basically, I loved how Sal said it. There's a good respect between these two fan bases because what they both bring to the table is incredible football. And that's what we're going to get ready for on Sunday.
It's going to be really fun on Sunday, obviously. Two teams that know each other very, very well, but they also have played, and that was later in the year. How in any way have the Chiefs changed since that last game when they came to Buffalo for what was their only loss, of course, of the regular season until the final week?
Yeah, what was that, week 11? So, it's been quite a while.
Last week, it was right before Thanksgiving, yep.
Okay, so kind of in the middle of November there. Very, very different in the way in which they've started their passing game as well. We've seen a little more of that quick action passing game. But Kansas City looked a lot different versus the Texans than what we saw against the Steelers. Now, two different teams, right? Texans defense is quite different than what the Steelers defense was presenting on Christmas Day for Kansas City. But even the week before, they played the Texans in week 16, I believe, and then they had to have the Steelers, and then of course you mentioned it, that last loss against Denver when none of the starters had, and we started to see, it felt like Kansas City finding that offensive identity, because all season long it's been these very close margin of victories and close games that could go one way or another. It's either defense that steps up, it's either special teams that steps up, and there really hasn't been, and maybe you guys can correct me outside looking in a little bit better, but there hasn't really been a pinpoint of like, oh, okay, so that's their identity. That's how they're going to be playing this season. It's just been, it's always going to be a close game, and Mahomes will close it out in the fourth quarter. So we saw a little bit more of that. I think they have found a little more of that offensive identity now that they brought in guys like Hollywood Brown, who came back and have been able to mix him in with Travis Kelce having those big games, because it's like, how do you spread out the coverage, right? You got to cover DeAndre Hopkins. You got to cover a guy like Hollywood Brown, now Xavier Worthy and his emergence in the league. And then you throw in a couple other players like the running backs, Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. So everyone's healthy, I would say, would be the long-winded answer to that. And so now things can kind of be played around with a little bit more. That doesn't mean my nerves are going to be okay this coming Sunday, because they love to keep you on the edge of their seat, but we'll have to see what happens.
I do want to know like a little bit more matchup specific stuff, but I also want to know, watching in Kansas City, what did Chiefs fans want? Did they want the Bills or did they want the Ravens? Like, who was there an opponent that they would have rather played or felt more comfortable playing?
So if you ask me, who has absolutely nothing to do with what transpires on the field on Sunday,
Yeah.
I wanted Buffalo selfishly, because of the relationship that we have, obviously, with you guys. But I think that these two teams, when you look at it, Buffalo and Kansas City, have a lot, like I said, a lot of mutual respect. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes actually seem to have a genuine relationship. They really respect each other's game and constantly have so much just speak so highly of each other whenever they talk on the podium. When you guys mentioned it in the intro, just the amount of chirpiness you get from the Ravens organization. And that's them. That's Baltimore, and that's what they stand by and live by. But it's almost like a little bit of disrespect. And that's why I selfishly wanted Buffalo, because whatever comes out of it, and I'm going to say this, and I hope that no one in Kansas City ever sees this interview, I'm happy with whoever goes to the Super Bowl, because the better team will advance to the Super Bowl. So whoever that happens to be on Sunday, great. Now, if the Chiefs were playing the Ravens, I'd be pissed if the Ravens went on Super Bowl, just because of the
you do already have 3 of them. You can share the wealth a little bit there, Hayley.
Matt, I told you multiple times in the postseason, I said, take it. I'm tired. I want a break. Take the game. And there were many times when I thought it was going to happen. I even texted you in the press box, and I was like, okay, this is y'all's year. This is going to happen.
Sal, this has happened multiple times. Like 13 seconds, we were probably 20 feet away from each other. And I think it was like, I can't believe this.
Congratulations.
I was like, I can't believe this is happening.
Oh, you're the one. You're the reason.
But you know what, though? I won't divulge or go at like any secrets or anything, but I was getting things coordinated for our trip to Kansas City coming up later this week. And I was talking to some friends there, and they said the exact same thing. They were like, hey, dude, we hope that after this game, we have the rest of the season off. I'm like, that's crazy to me. I was like, covering a Super Bowl sounds really fun, but I guess if you've done it 4 times in the last 5 years,
There's Super Bowl coverage fatigue. Wow. I mean,
apparently.
It's
not
a little bit silver spoon in the mouth. I mean, I am showing my privilege as I say this, but again, I will be happy if Buffalo goes on, because Buffalo has been they've done such a great job. It seems like Allen has really found his flow with the offense. And honestly, all in all, it's been a fun team to watch objectively, but whatever happens, happens.
So one of the ways in which it appears from the outside, you tell me, that they have changed over the course of the season, not just since that game, is maybe utilizing Xavier Worthy a little bit more, right? There's been so much made about the Xavier Worthy trade in the draft where the Chiefs took him from the Bills pick. The Bills go down, they get Keon Coleman. Not that the numbers have been overwhelming, but they're targeting him a little bit more. They're getting him the ball in space a little bit more. It seems like that's been an uptick. Is that correct?
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, he had to take on such a bigger role because of key injuries that happened on the offense. So, first week of the preseason, you lose a guy like Hollywood Brown, who was supposed to come in and be that veteran presence in the wide receiver room. And then you have a guy like Rashee Rice, who's going into his sophomore year, rolling. Everything seemed to be going right for him, who gets injured so early on in the season. And now all of a sudden, it's like, who do the Chiefs have in their receiving core? Because that's when they had to go out and get DeAndre Hopkins. They had to go out and bring back Juju Smith-Schuster. And then they had a couple of injuries of their own with McCole Hardman as well. So I think he's had to take on a bigger load than anticipated had everything gone perfectly correct this season. But he's done an exceptional job stepping up to the plate. And I remember speaking with his wide receiver coach from Texas, who actually talked about when he has the pressure on him, he performs so well. And we saw it week 1 when he started off with that first touchdown of the game against a team that, talked a lot of crap and said, you're too small. He won't win contested catches, whatever that might be. He's continued to take that workload and do very well with it. Now, there's some rookie mistakes. We see some issues with him every so often, whether it be being on the right route or making sure that he's calling an audible halfway through his route and lining up with what Mahomes is thinking. Maybe a more veteran receiver would be able to do that, keeping his feet in bounds a few times. But again, he's taken on a really big workload, and it's starting to pan out. It's been really successful down the stretch. So I every single week when I'm betting, I put always the higher on Xavier Worthy receptions.
Well, considering it's against the Bills this week, I would take all of the Xavier Worthy prop bets if you're somebody who's into that type of thing. The running game, it seems like it's not clicking as much as it has in the past. Is that just the outside perception, or is that genuinely a bit of a concern?
And can I piggyback on this? If you could include maybe Isaiah Pacheco in here and his return, because we thought that would actually flip once that happened. Yeah.
Right. I think a lot of people did too. I think when Isaiah Pacheco got hurt week 2 against the Bengals, it was, oh no, what is everyone, what's going to happen? This run game, especially down the stretch last season, really started to mold into something that maybe Kansas City could find a running identity. And then when they brought in Kareem Hunt, it was the worry, oh, is he, he hasn't been in this game for a while. Is he too old? Is he going to fit back into things? Kareem Hunt is the better suited running back right now for the Kansas City Chiefs. And Isaiah Pacheco, although coming back in, has been a great another great option. You saw it there in the opening drive against the Texans. Now, maybe things got a little bit off because they all of a sudden returned the kickoff all the way to the red zone. And so their opening drive probably was a much shorter version of what was originally anticipated to see out of Kansas City. So they start in the red zone, two separate snaps right off the bat. They feed it to Isaiah Pacheco and it goes nowhere. And then they start feeding Kareem Hunt, and all of a sudden he starts working against the Texans defense. So we've kind of looked through all of the running game, and like you guys said, we thought that would be the return, the spark for the running game. But really, it seems like Kareem Hunt has worked with this offensive line more seamlessly, and also worked with the Chiefs' offense more seamlessly. So not to say that Isaiah Pacheco will not be seeing a big playing role on this team in the future, but right now, Kareem Hunt's the hot hand that they keep feeding.
All right, so on the offense, last one on the offense for me, if Matt wants to go on there. I do want to obviously talk about the offensive line. It's been kind of the most talked about unit on this team the entire season. It's been considered, in I guess a manner of speaking, the weak link, right? I mean, it's all relative how you say that, right? And really hasn't seemed like it's quite figured out yet. Joe Thuney now playing at left tackle, obviously that's helped a little bit, but I watched the game against the Texans and they do have a very good front seven. We know that. But here we are again. Mahomes seems like he's under duress a little bit. Like, where is that right now, their pass protection and their offensive line?
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, the biggest thing was Kansas City never wanted to revert back to what happened in Super Bowl 55 when they played against the Bucs. Patrick Mahomes was running around for his entire life because that offensive line completely collapsed and he had no protection. So when that started to show at the beginning of this season, because this has been an issue all season long, right? They kind of put their faith in the second-year guy, Wanye Morris, during training camp, and then they bring in this rookie, Kingsley Suamataia from BYU, thinking that he's going to be the answer. Again, it's a very, very big ask of a rookie offensive lineman to start in the NFL his first season. The transition from the style of ball that he was playing in college to now how they're utilized as offensive linemen. And then just also being an island out there completely on his own as a left tackle. It didn't work out with Wanye Morris. They tried a little bit with Kingsley. They tried almost like platooning the role, and it still just continued to not work. So they bring in this guy, DJ Humphries, who's a 9-year NFL vet, played with the Cardinals. And then, of course, the first week that he plays for the Chiefs late down the stretch, I would say it's like the last third of the season, he comes in fourth quarter, gets a hamstring injury that keeps him out all the way until the final game of the regular season. So they had to kind of make an audible and make things move quickly. And they said, all right, let's take our all-pro guard and move him out to left tackle. And so Joe Thuney goes from left guard to left tackle. And then all of a sudden they bring in this guy named Mike Caliendo to replace his guard position at left guard. And that offensive line in 3 games that they played down the stretch of the regular season only allowed 1 sack for Mahomes compared to the 35 times that Mahomes was sacked with previous offensive lines. So it seemed like it was finally working, but then, you see this in the Texans game, again, against a very strong front seven, that Joe Thuney truly is his best at left guard, right? You're asking a lot of this guy. The versatility of the offensive line is incredible in the league, but you're asking a lot of a guy who has to go against some of the best in the league. So I think that was really showing that this is going to be a big offseason issue, but the end of the story is there's no other option. Like this is what they're going to have to rely on Sunday going up against the Bills defense. So that's kind of the long-winded way of how they got there, but that really is what it looks like to be their best option.
So one last offensive question, and it's that when the Bills played the Chiefs in week 11 or whatever week it was, Sal, what was it? Kelce, 2 catches for 8 yards. That was the stat line.
I think that might have been it. You have to go back
in the playoffs last year. Travis Kelce against the Bills, after doing nothing for weeks, was 6 targets, 5 catches, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns. He is a massive reason why the Bills lost in the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
To think 2 catches for 8 yards this week is super unrealistic. But does he still have that ceiling of being the guy that can completely take over a game?
I don't know, guys. Make it make sense. It
It does
doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
We even saw, the amount of stats that I had to read off on Monday morning that Travis Kelce broke with his
Mhm.
117 yards on 7 receptions and 1 touchdown in this past week against
Yeah.
the Texans in the playoffs. And he's not the guy that you normally throw around. Oh, there's a playoff version of Travis Kelce, because usually during the regular season, and again, I'm not talking
Really
so
good.
much about this year and the year before. Yeah, he's
Really good,
he's
yeah.
he's pretty good throughout. So to see him all of a sudden have this spark, it's kind of like, oh, okay, old man still got it.
Mhm.
He's gonna prove a point that he's still got it. But I will also say, I think the difference between week 11 right now and the playoffs again, were the different offensive arsenal that we were talking about,
Sure.
the offensive players who came back in. So who do you choose?
Yeah, pick your poison.
Yeah, you have so many players, and I think that was a thing. Also, the Ravens had a really good offensive picking of who they could throw to it. And I mean, obviously with the loss of Zay Flowers, but it's been incredible to see what he's been able to do, especially at the age that he is. And I remember there was one catch, I think he got like, it was a 49-yard reception. I believe it was 20 yards.
Mhm.
Yak is what he had.
Yeah.
And he looked like he was walking 6 miles per hour. I mean, he was like slow motion, going through, and you don't realize, like, okay, he's lost a little bit of speed, but 5 defenders just, bounced off his body as he was running towards the goal line. So what do we see of Travis Kelce on Sunday? I would expect more of that.
Mhm.
But, it's one of those things where there's not really a rhyme or reason why things have switched completely on for him.
It is amazing. You look at last week's box score. Only one wide receiver caught a pass. Xavier Worthy had 5 of them. That's it.
That's crazy.
No other wide receiver caught a pass last week. We talk about that here in Buffalo. People are always, I can't believe it. No receiving core. And, how come this guy's not involved? That guy's not involved. Holy cow, look what the Chiefs. I mean, Kelce picked up the slack with his catches, his 7 for, over 100 yards, but it is quite amazing. Like, what about, D-Hop and his fit in this offense and where that's going? Is it just inconsistent? Is it game plan wise? What do you see there?
I think when we talked through this on our post-game show, it really just seemed the game fit. And we kind of said, okay, well, where was Isaiah Pacheco? Where was DeAndre Hopkins in this game? And really, it just came down to what worked best against the Texans defense from the analytical standpoint of things. Now, does that actually mean that that's going to transpire into this next week? I mean, we'll have to see. But it's always when one player is hot, you see another. It's like Travis Kelce and one wide receiver are hot. And then like the next game, it's Kareem Hunt and then DeAndre Hopkins have a great game. It's always funny what the pairings are, because there's no, again, we'd have to really get into the numbers, but I haven't been able to find a perfect pattern for why the 2 offensive players get really hot. But it's always 2. It's always 2 offensive
Right.
players get hot per game. And
Well, it's
there's
good
no
game
really
planning,
rhyme or
right? I
reason.
mean, you find what's going to work, and I guess you have to credit Andy Reid and his offensive staff for saying, "Hey, these are the guys that we think can, we can target in this game that are
Right.
going to help."
But
I have a healthy respect for that, because I think that's what Belichick did with running backs for many years.
Yeah. But I mean, we've even tried to go through by the numbers to find out which 2 pairs
Yeah.
together per game,
Yeah.
and if it lines up with Chargers and Chargers or Bills and Bills and
Yeah.
different things, and it doesn't. And it's like,
Sure.
okay, well, that's why Andy Reid gets paid, and I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
It makes sense.
Defensively, their defense is very good. And I think that we all know about Chris Jones. We all know about Trent McDuffie. There's a lot of guys who, that we know can take over a game. But they have Jalen Watson back. They didn't have Jalen Watson when they played earlier in the season. What is it? Amenahu? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Charles Amenahu, yeah.
Yeah, so him also, he's back. He wasn't in that last game. So just like, how much more dangerous or consistent is their defense now compared to what it was earlier in the season because of these guys coming back?
Yeah, I think, again, the Kansas City Chiefs have a great front seven, what they bring defensively, also their interior linemen. It's the pressure that they can put on a quarterback. Now, again, we're talking about a guy like Josh Allen, who unfortunately is very hard to bring down and is a very big body kind of guy. And when he gets going, you saw against the Chiefs the last time they met, he just bulldozes his way into the end zone. But I think with the addition, let's start with the secondary. So Jalen Watson being back, right? The Chiefs had to fill the void of L'Jarius Sneed. So their top cornerback goes to the Tennessee Titans, and then they fill in with Trent McDuffie, who's done an exceptional job filling in his shoes. The guy across the field from him, the guy he's supposed to be able to trust with his entire life, has now gotten hurt after having a very promising season in Jalen Watson. And then they have to bring in this rotation of 3 players. And really the 3 players that continue to rotate there were Shamari Connor, Joshua Williams, and Nazeeh Johnson. And neither one of the 3 ever really got things going to where one of them was demanding that starting role. So it just kind of rotated them all throughout the season until now they have Jalen Watson. And I would say if even Jalen Watson can play 75% of what his best game is, that's going to give Kansas City just so much more trust in that secondary. So again, that just starts to bolster up what was already decently good. I thought that the secondary probably would have been their biggest weakness. And then that's just continued to make that better. Now, we'll see how he does this week against the Bills. And then you're talking about guys like Charles Omenihu. You're talking about guys like George Karlaftis, Turk Wharton, and all the people that you saw how many times they were able to bring down CJ Stroud. Again, that's a little bit more to do with his offensive line as well. Yeah. But just how much pressure. And then the game plan by Steve Spagnuolo, what he does in the fourth quarter, the guy's a genius. And if anyone could maybe make a push for being in the Hall of Fame as a coordinator, it's what Steve Spagnuolo has been able to do with the Kansas City Chiefs. So in my opinion, I think the defense is good. They've only gotten stronger. And so what makes the difference between the last time they saw the Bills and now is that they're just finding their rhythm. The defense continues to find the rhythm down the stretch. And I think it's going to be a really big storyline going into this one.
Yeah, I mean, both these teams don't really get after the quarterback very well. 39 total sacks for both of them, is below the average of the league. And the Chiefs last week were amazing. But I want to kind of course, read into that we know the Texans' offensive line wasn't. What about that pass rush? Because really for the most of the year, they're about, I think, 21st in the league as far as sacks per pass attempt. Where are they getting that pass rush from? Do they have to generate it from extra blitzes? Do they try to get home with the front 4? How do they get there?
I mean, I think blitz, definitely. That's something that we saw specifically in this last game.
Yes.
But I think Kansas City really, the way in which they're finding a way to get it done without having the accolades in the stat column, right? And that was a question that was asked to Steve Spagnuolo all throughout the season. And do you care about the stats? Why are we not seeing as many? We're seeing the QB hurries, but we're not necessarily seeing you guys be able to finish it and get to the quarterback. And I think the biggest thing that he had to say, and this is not really an answer to your question, so I apologize, but they just kept saying the line over and over again. I don't care as long as we win.
Right.
I don't care as long as we win. I don't care what my stat record is, as Chris Jones saying that for a much lower sack count than he usually has per season, just saying, I don't care as long as we did enough to win. Again, doesn't answer the question necessarily because it's kind of been a culmination of different ways in which they've approached it. But this week it's going to have to be completely different because you can't even compare the Bills and the Texans.
Hey, Hayley, is Chris Jones healthy? I mean, he got his calf worked on again during the game a little bit.
Right. So in terms of what we're told, he is healthy.
Okay.
He had the last time that he tweaked his game was actually against the Texans in the regular season. That kept him out of that Christmas Day game against the Steelers. But he looks to be healthy. He there was no injury update post game and no injury update yesterday from Andy Reid. We should find out tomorrow if there is anything. But I would say the most maybe we'll see him a limited participant. But
I mean, it feels to me like he's healthy. He's going to play, but but I guess I'm wondering how much it's bothering him. He was getting worked on again during the game. I guess that's what I'd be wondering.
Yeah.
I think it's a good question. It's something we'll have to monitor going into this one. I haven't heard anything specifically, but we'll have to see.
Hayley, so I'm looking at the box scores, and obviously there's so much more to a game than just the box scores, but I'm looking at the game week 11, and one of the ways the Bills are so different now than they have been over the years playing Kansas City is their ability to consistently run the ball and their dedication to run the ball.
Yeah.
When they played earlier in the year, James Cook averaged 2.2 yards a carry against Kansas City's run defense. That's not good.
Really? That was it?
Well, that's kind of why I'm going there, because Mixon had success with a not very good offensive line against the Chiefs in the run game. Now, I don't know if that's game plan specific. If Kansas City's like, hey, we'll let you run it on us because we don't think that that's going to be how we lose. But is that an area where the Bills could potentially not win, but have success? Like, they were really committed to the run against the number one rush defense in the NFL in Baltimore, and they didn't veer off of it. I would imagine we see something similar this week.
I mean, it definitely could be. It depends on how the game plan, transpires. But that was something we also kind of pinpoint and went through that and thought, okay, is this just where the Chiefs are taking a little bit of a loss because they're going to find success in other areas? But when you mentioned it, that's kind of odd. I didn't realize it was that low.
Yeah.
From it didn't feel like that. Does that make
No.
sense? It didn't
No.
feel like that at all. And I would have put the run defense for Kansas City pretty high in the last couple of weeks. But we'll have to see. That's again something I find interesting to see what happens this week, because it's almost like how the stats have been with Kansas City this year. It's been so inconsistent, right? Like one week it's good, the next week it's not. And it makes me wonder, okay, what is the conversation like in those meeting rooms? Is it really to the point of, okay, we'll take a little bit here and we'll go a little bit here, or are the Chiefs inconsistent and we're just not seeing it? Does that make sense?
No, it totally does.
If you look at their yards per, I'm just looking at their yards per play given up, and I will tell you, of course, all these stats can always be skewed by things, right? You never know.
Sure.
They're volume stats. But yards per play given up on the ground, they were generally only 3.5, and then over the last several weeks, it's 6.6 to Cleveland, 4.9 to Houston that first game, 6.5 to the Steelers.
Yeah.
And then last week, of course, what was last week? I mean, let me just check real quick. 5.1. It just feels like they've been a little bit more leaky, I guess, against the run, Hayley, than they were earlier in the year.
I think that makes sense. And that's funny that you mentioned it started at the Cleveland game, because I specifically remember looking at it before going into the Browns game thinking, oh, okay, Kansas City's been able to stop the run pretty darn good this season. Let's see what happens. So maybe, was that a change? Because that's relatively, again, when we saw the addition of Charles Omenihu coming back in, maybe they've kind of changed the way in which they've been scheming things differently for offenses. Or maybe I'm talking about a bunch of hoopla that doesn't matter, and they just slowly regressed at being able to stop the run.
We talk about a bunch of hoopla pretty much every episode that we do this, so I don't think that would be off base. Sal, do you have any defensive questions left? Because I have one more just kind of big picture question.
No, but I do have a special teams question. Obviously, Chiefs have been known for their special teams over the last several years. They've been so good. And obviously, Harrison Butker's been very good. A bit different this year. They've had an injury, had to sign some kickers. I looked at their numbers, return game. The Bills have had issues on special teams this year. Some teams have gotten them. Kick returns haven't been great against them. They've allowed a few punts, fake punts that have happened. Where are the Chiefs right now? Special teams. Is it up to the standard they're normally used to, I guess?
Maybe not necessarily, just slightly below.
Okay.
Kansas City, as we've seen many times before, special teams, wins and loses games for you a lot of times. And you have to be so dependent on that. And it used to be where you could be, or excuse me, last year, I'm acting like it's been this long time since, you were so dependent on Harrison Butker. You didn't have to worry about anything. You always knew, okay, it's 60 plus, cool. He's going to get it through. Now, obviously, he changed a little bit about how he started approaching his kick. That's something that special teams coordinator Dave Tobe shared with us. So he always lands on that left knee after he's kicking through, and that's what caused him to need surgery. And then I think it's almost opinion. They rushed him back a little bit. And it seemed like they bring it, they had these other kickers that they signed, which it actually worked out with pretty well. Matthew Wright coming back had been with the Chiefs before when Harrison Butker was hurt. And he just maybe wasn't trusting himself as well. And there was this new dynamic to it. Also, you lose a guy like Tommy Townsend, who arguably is the best punter in the entire league. Not to say that Matt Riza can't. I mean, you guys are familiar with him. Not to say he hasn't done a terrible job. But again, it hasn't been as solidified as it has been in years past. So I would say the trust level is maybe like an 80% when it usually would be a 99%. And that does get dicey when you go into these close situational games where it comes down to 3-1 points. As you saw the Texans, they couldn't depend on their kicker, and they lost, I think, at least 4 points from that. So it's one of those things that makes you kind of worry a little bit. I would say I'm more comfortable after what he did this past week. But again, it seemed like Kansas City maybe rushed him a little bit back from that surgery, and we'll have to see if he's good to go this coming Sunday.
So I'm sitting here and I'm looking at all of the different playoff matchups over the years. And you have to go back to 2017 for an AFC championship game that did not involve the Kansas City Chiefs. That is disgusting. That's absolutely absurd. So there's been a lot of teams, right? And I know that this might be a bit of a difficult question, but where is the confidence level compared to what it has been in the past? I feel like when I was there in 2020. It was right at the beginning of the Bills wave, but the Chiefs were just kind of getting to their like superpower. Like, I don't really think anybody going into that game thought the Bills were going to win. I think there were people who thought they could win, but I don't know if anybody was like, oh, the Bills are going to win. What is the vibe now? Like, where's the confidence level that, okay, this three-peat thing is going to definitely happen?
You're going to put me in a really bad spot because this is the trickery that is Patrick Mahomes. I feel like, in my opinion, the last couple of seasons covering this team, my confidence in what they've been able to do has slowly gone down little by little. Yet they consistently keep winning the biggest games and getting to back-to-back Super Bowl champs. Which is the juxtaposition here, right?
Sure.
That I feel like ever since the 2019 season, he goes and wins Super Bowl 54. They go back for the next season and they get, their butts handed to them by Tom Brady, and all of a sudden it's like reality hit. Does this team actually have that spark, or were we all just kind of on this bandwagon? And then they've continued to make it back to those big games, but yet every single year I feel like I'm picking them apart more and more and more. Now, this year feels so much different than years past, even though they have one of the best, the best franchise record that they've ever been able to have. But yet it feels so crappy. It feels so different. And then every time I bet against them, every time I think that it's not going to happen, every time I say it out loud, it always gets put back in my face. So the confidence level, absolutely. In my opinion, it has to go down because you see what they're playing and you see 2019 and you see Patrick Mahomes making these magical shots. But then what did we see last week against the Texans? He's getting tackled, and as he goes down, makes this atrocious throw to Travis Kelce, and he catches it in the end zone. And all of a sudden it's like, well, crap. That is who they are. So I can't, I'm going to put my foot in my mouth either way answering that question. But it's definitely one of those things. You don't bet against them. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. Okay?
I know.
I'm with you.
I know.
It's still Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and you just can't ever. I don't care
it's
how
an unquantifiable stat.
I know.
You can't, and people have tried to do it. DVOA can't even do it. They can't figure out a way to make it make sense.
It's crazy. That's all I got. Sal, anything?
No. Just before we let Hayley go, obviously, just on the Bills end for everybody, and Hayley, just so you know, for your preparations, Christian Benford in concussion protocol. We'll be monitoring that on Wednesday. The Bills' outstanding cornerback. He got hurt on the onside kick. He took a head-to-head shot, basically, but he's in concussion protocol, and we know that Taylor Rapp is day to day. The outstanding safety who did pick off Patrick Mahomes in that first series, obviously, the first time they played. And, that is, he looked it looked way worse, Matt, than day to day. He got loaded into the carpet off the field. I was told, as a sideline reporter, Hayley, I was told he's going in for X-rays, and then he never came out. They declared him out. Like, okay, this is, and then he's day to day. We'll see where that goes. And then the other one is we're all watching. Matt and I, we don't know what's going on with Matt Milano after Sean McDermott's answer about him yesterday. I mean, it seemed a bit interesting. He said he wasn't aware of any injury, but he also said he hadn't any updates from the training staff. Matt didn't play the final 3 plays and 2-point conversion. He was still on the field on the sidelines. That was the only time he really missed in the game. We did see post-game pictures. Internet sleuths.
Oh, we were sleuthing so hard yesterday. We were texting each other like, we're like, hey, he just posted on Instagram. Like, you wouldn't do that if you were injured.
I know.
Yeah, but it's true. Like, that's what we're doing. We're trying to.
And he also was in the locker room afterwards where there was a picture with the post-game pictures, and he's there and he's got a smile. So all we're saying here, folks, is stay tuned with Matt and I tomorrow on Wednesday. We'll give you an update from One Bills Drive. We'll do what we call a hallway episode, Hayley. We go into the hallway to record during the meet after Sean McDermott talks before practice.
Do you guys actually now Buffalo, from what I've heard, you guys have a nice media room. You guys got space. You're treated well. We're working with like 4 foldable chairs shoved into a teeny little room. So I mean, the hallway podcast sounds pretty cool.
It's not bad.
It's the only spot we really get sometimes. We don't want to be rude to our colleagues because they also feed us very well on a Wednesday and they're eating at the time.
You get food too?
Every Wednesday.
Week.
They're great.
Every week.
Great food.
Every week.
Pizza, wings, subs. Oh yeah, you name it.
You better watch out. You better not want to go, because if you win and you go to the Super Bowl, your life's going to change. They're not going to need you anymore.
Yeah,
you're not going to be getting that free food anymore if the Bills win the Super Bowl.
I want in 4 years somebody to be reaching out to me from another team and being like, I hope that you get to go cover the Super Bowl because I'm sick of it. That's what I want to happen. I just don't feel like that's going to be, how it plays out. Thank you, Hayley, very much for joining us. I appreciate it. We'll talk later.
Let's tell everybody where they can find you, Hayley, obviously.
Oh, yep. You can find me at Hayley Lewis _sports on TikTok because it's back, baby. On Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff.
All right, you got it. Hayley Lewis, thanks for joining us here. Matt and I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Always, if you like the show, make sure you subscribe, download, listen, give us a nice rating, a review, iTunes, Spotify, and of course, on YouTube, you can see our smiling faces. It's Sal Sports on YouTube.